What we see with world-class companies is that they'll spend between 10 and 20% on quality as a whole. And so they want to see, can I ensure great releases, world-class end user experiences, and actually save some money in the process, especially in the world that we're a part of right now where companies are so cost conscious. It's good to see you, Joel. How you been, man?
Dude, it's great to see you. I'm super excited. I was working out this morning and something like popped in my upper back and now my voice sounds a little off. So I don't know how off it sounds to you, but it sounds pretty off to me. But I feel like fine. My back feels fine too. So I'm like, I don't know what to do about that.
You popped your back and got a frog in your throat. Like, I didn't know that was a thing.
I'm not a doctor. I don't know. But I asked my wife, I was like, what should I do? And she's like, maybe you should go to a chiropractor. So my back feels fine. And she's like, just wait 24 hours. It happened this morning. And I was like, all right, I'll wait. I'll see what happens.
It's turned into a little bit of Seth Rogen is where I'm going with it, which I like Seth Rogen a lot. So I think you should just roll with it, man.
I'll just roll with it. Yes. But we can always invite you back for a second episode if you're not happy with the quality of my voice.
No, I'll take it. I think it adds a good air. I occasionally go nasally. So I'm from upstate New York, and so my voice may go into this weird Syracuse thing. And then occasionally it goes, like Syracuse. Then occasionally it goes Austin. So I might throw a y'all or a fix it too, and you can just edit those things out.
Well, how long have you been in Austin?
I've been in Austin for 25 years, Joel. I moved here in 1997. I thought it would be 1 year. I was in New York and San Francisco and North Carolina, and then fell in love with the music, the tacos, and the opportunity to build companies in Austin. So it's been a great place to have a career in technology. It's been a great place to have kids. I have 3 kids, and it's been a fun place to listen to and play a lot of music too.
Do you still feel that way after the past 5 years of everybody rushing there?
Well, I think the data is about 150,000 people a year have moved to Austin for something like the last 17 years. So the greater metro area was 750,000 people when I first moved here. Felt pretty much like the town I grew up in, which was about 350,000, and now greater metro is 2.6 million. But for me, it's been more like the slow boil of the frog, which I don't think actually is true. I think the frog jumps out of the boiling water. But most people know that metaphor. And so it's now big, and yes, traffic sucks, but I have 3 kids. They love it here. We like it here. So you kind of deal with the changes in the city, and you take advantage of all the great things, like better restaurants than ever by far.
Have you gotten to see Joe Rogan driving around town?
I've not seen Mr. Rogan. Are you a Joe Rogan fan?
Oh yeah, I like his stand-up comedy, but I also like his shows. I specifically like the ones where he interviews like Neil deGrasse Tyson or Elon Musk. So I don't listen to a lot of the content. I follow a special playlist called like Tech and Science, where it's just the tech and sciencey people from his podcast.
That's cool. Yeah. I saw Neil deGrasse Tyson speak at the Long Center here in Austin, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And he opened up his presentation and he said, the universe is trying to kill you. And so, of course, everybody paid attention from that on out. And he spent about 5 minutes talking about how basically there are systems that are made for us to die.
Did he take his shoes off?
I don't think he took his shoes off on stage. Oh. Does he normally do that?
Yeah, I went to one of his talks that he gave about, it was a fun one about the ways that the science movies got science wrong. And so he played little clips from the movies and talked about how they got the physics wrong or the astrophysics wrong or whatever. And at the beginning of the talk, it was at the Straz in Tampa, and it sounds like a performing arts center. And he took his shoes off and he's like, I just feel more comfortable with my shoes off. I'm like, okay.
Now that you mention it, he may have taken his shoes off at the Long Center. Yeah, he's great, and he's big into Carl Sagan, of course. I think he studied under Carl Sagan, and he inspired me when I was in Ithaca to go to Carl Sagan's gravesite. As he's a professor at Cornell University. Yeah, so Neil is awesome. I'll have to listen to the Joe Rogan, Neil deGrasse Tyson interview. That's a good tip.
Yeah, he's a ballsy guy. He walks around, he's got no case on his cell phone.
Oh my gosh.
Mr. Tyson. Oh,
yes. That's living on the edge.
So tell me about Testlio. Am I saying that correct?
Yes. Well done. It's a made up word. Testlio. So the company's about 10 years old. It's a testing services company. It's technology powered. And we work with some really big and innovative companies to help them solve really tricky problems in the area of quality engineering and quality assurance.
Where do you draw the lines of, like, you seem like you test so many things? Everything from when I was prepping, I saw that like Super Bowl, World Cup, like giant digital events, the OTT devices, apps before they go on the App Store. My mind was very narrow to testing because I was like an enterprise software engineer, for lack of a better term. And so I just considered testing as far as like the test I would write with my Ruby code and test-driven development. But this is a whole other level. This is testing multiple things, multiple industries. So where do you draw the line?
So as you probably experienced as you were developing and automating unit tests yourself and responsible for the code you were checking in, and then as you've worked with lots of CTOs and VPs of engineering, shift left, it is a real thing. It works. A pyramid-centric approach towards software testing is logical. The majority of testing should happen at units and API levels and end-to-end systems as they come together. At the same time, though, the stakes for end-user experiences are higher than ever before. So the industry, I think, has advanced a whole lot in shift left. What we see is that there's also a similar shift right that's occurring, where companies are investing more in exploratory testing, visual testing, usability testing, accessibility testing, location-centric testing, payment verification testing. And so when companies have experiences that hit the glass, especially if they're hard to roll back. So Pure Web, I'd offer, is different. I know Launch Darkly was a guest of yours. We love Launch Darkly and systems like Launch Darkly that allow teams to intelligently try things out, feature flag, roll back, which works really well for web. But when you're releasing a native app, or you're integrating a payment experience, or you're hosting the Super Bowl, or you're about to deploy a beta release to drivers, and you're a global mobility provider, the stakes are really high and things need to work. And I think that that's where Testlio is really, really well suited. We think of these as like moments that matter of software releases, where you want to put extra energy and emphasis to truly ensure a great end user experience. Does that help, Joel? Did I get to what you were looking for there?
Yeah, well, we're headed in the right direction. So right. I'm going to approach it from a lot of different aspects because this is how I understand something. I attack it from a bunch of angles and then I leave with my understanding. So if I was going to do like integration test or some type of feature test to replicate an end user experience and then check that these certain things are working. Well, first of all, typically I'm checking just for the functionality of the post actually happening, the response actually happening. I'm not actually looking. I don't have any systems like actually look at the screen and look at aesthetics or end user experience. So that's one huge benefit. The second thing is when I am doing those types of tests, I'm typically like bumping up like a Selenium browser or some sort of like headless type browser or something. And there's so many different types. Like when I send an email campaign, I have a cool little tool that'll show me like what it's going to look like in 100 different platforms. Right. And so to get that, I couldn't imagine myself writing and implementing tests. And there's so many test cases to test. So this part of the question is, how do you help figure out like how many test cases to test when there's like an infinite number when you're working with a client?
And then as you think about how many test cases, which of those should you automate and which of those should you intentionally use manual testing for? And so like many things, it really varies broadly depending upon the team, the maturity of the team, the pace of deployment, what sort of software deployment approaches the different teams are using, how big the problem is, what the risk profile is. So I'll give you an example that might be on maybe the opposite end of the spectrum of what you were describing. So we do work with large software companies like Microsoft. And there's a team at Microsoft that has a product that many of us know and love. And the stakes are super high for that product. And the team has measurement as well as compensation systems that are tied to a completely bug-free experience. And the approach that team takes is a multi-release gate approach. They have, I believe, 4 now different release gates that they go through. And Testlio is actually the final release gate in working with this team. So what they've said is, because the stakes are so high, we want to do all of what you described at scale in different ways and more. And then where Testlio comes in is this machine and human approach to ensuring that the end user experience is great. And a lot of times that tends to push out towards multiple device OS combinations. So on average, and this varies quite a lot too, but when we work with companies, each test run covers 24 device OS combinations. And we have 1,200 different hardware devices in our global network. So we can test against a lot of different types of hardware. And for some companies, that really matters a lot to them beyond just like a standard, say, Chrome browser instance. So let me pause there and see if that went in a direction that helped.
Yeah. It's gonna, things now are becoming very hardware specific. I was having a conversation the other day with a guy that's building an offline chat GPT, which is using specific hardware that's only available in certain phones, right? And so being able to pick the specific hardware and understand how it works across, I didn't realize how many different devices there were and how many different types of hardware, and also how in different platforms they only let you target phones in specific ways, right?
Yes.
Like you can't, from what I understand, you can't target a specific version of iOS and make it available or not, but you can target like a hardware segment,
yes,
which was interesting. So now that we're getting such a huge array of devices, hardwares, and systems, to test that at scale becomes even more complicated, right?
Very much so. And devices vary so much by different countries. So for example, we've helped Sky launch into Africa. And we work with a large African messaging or African continent-centric messaging company called Ioba. And the device profile, oftentimes these are $10 smartphones, that are being sourced from small providers in China, available from communications providers and retail outlets. And so those devices are really different from what might get tested on the National Basketball Association, for example, is a client of ours too. And so we'll test in places like Rio, because basketball is super popular. And the experience in Rio, there you have a translated, localized experience of the NBA app that has to be like amazingly authentic for what's happening in now time in Rio. And so the device is different and the experience matters. And maybe at some point too, we could have a conversation about localization beyond just a linguistic translation. Because that's also a big driver for companies that are really operating at massive scale and thinking about how authentic that they need to be in different markets.
What does that mean, authentic?
That means that, so for example, we work with a top 3 social media provider. And for that social media provider, they want to ensure that the experience of their product is true to the culture, which is a combination of history, sociology, trend, and language. And so that when they localize, they will go through translations and they will go through different screen modifications and even feature modifications. And then they'll use Testlio with people on the ground in those countries who are a combination of linguistic and testing experts who actually know what the experience of that product should be because they're authentic users of the product. So maybe to even take a step back, in order to tackle something like that, we had to go through about 2,000 potential testers to build an initial team of 200 people to serve this customer. And what the customer demanded was that not only do people really know testing, but that they have a very high expectation for the experience of the product. And this particular company may only release in some of these countries. We work with them in 62 countries right now. They may only release 2 or 3 or 4 times per year. So it's unexpected when these releases are coming. They're not scheduled. A lot of times things come together and there's a decision that's made. And so that's where that elasticity or that burstability of testing really comes into play too. Did that help give you a sense of, yeah.
You guys do a lot. It's huge. What is happening within a company for people that are listening that might be considering using a service like yours? What type of conversations are typically happening in their company before they come and find you?
So we're thrilled to be here, Joe. We love the podcast. Thank you for hosting us. Our clients are typically chief technology officers or their equivalent. And so many companies have quality teams internally, yet the quality team works in close partnership with the CTO, SVP of engineering, who really sets a release and a bug tolerance and a testing strategy for the organization. So we often come when companies are ready to experiment with a new testing strategy. And in some instances, it's been, hey, we tried 100% automation for a couple of years, and we realized that has some pros and cons associated with it. So there's a large fintech company that their CTO came to us about a month ago and said, we sense that it's time now to integrate a new approach to manual testing into what we've been doing in a world of 100% automation. With other companies, it might be that, well, we've gotten pretty good at manual testing. Maybe they're using a crowdsourced technique as well. And they realize we're not automating enough and we're not automating quickly enough internally. So can you help us accelerate the pace of automation? And then for some companies, there's this sense, we see this quite a lot, that we've been doing pretty well in automation. We started with our unit tests and we're all the way up to now visual and functional automation. And you know what, we've been doing some manual testing too, and that kind of works well. But the two things are like completely disconnected. Manual testing happens over here and automate testing happens over there. And there's got to be a better way, right? And so we have a methodology that we call fused software testing that brings automated and manual testing together. And it really handles the fluidity and pace that's needed in a modern DevOps driven release environment. So it's usually this sense of, we want to go faster. We want to try something different. And in some cases, Joel, it's cost too. So what we see with world-class companies is that they'll spend between 10 and 20% on quality as a whole. And maybe we can have a conversation about how do you think about that? How do you measure those economics? But sometimes quality costs can creep up and companies feel like that they just might be spending too much. And so they want to see, can I ensure great releases, world-class end user experiences, and actually save some money in the process? Especially in the world that we're a part of right now, where companies are so cost conscious.
10 to 20% of what?
Of overall software development spend. So you can look at that as, how much do we spend on our core development team? Do we have any dedicated quality resources? And some companies don't. So they may think of a percentage of time that's spent on quality as an element of their overall software development spend. Some organizations have an outsourcing partner, some have an in-house team and an outsourced partner. And so thinking about this sense of how much do I spend to help my technology be great at the 10 to 20% mark, and it's different. Some companies are significantly less, and some companies need to be significantly more depending upon the world that they're in. If you're in a regulated industry, if you provide medical technologies, your ratio might be much higher than 20%. But that's a range that oftentimes helps companies enter into the conversation and the consideration of what's my spend tolerance, what's my bug tolerance, and what do I want to do strategically, and how open to experimentation might I be in the world of quality too.
How do you measure the cost of not doing this?
So there's a concept of escaped issues. And an escaped issue is arguably something that hits production that should have been caught somewhere along the way. And so when we see companies testing, whether we're testing for them or they're testing in other ways, we hold that for every 1,000 hours of testing, you should see one or less escaped issues. It's a 0.1% escaped issue to hour of testing ratio. And so there's this sense of if you're doing things and you're seeing more escapes, then maybe you need to change the approach that you're undertaking. Or again, if you feel like, you know what, it's taking too long, measured by clock time or calendar time. You know, the sense of speed and pace is another indicator. And if, you know, your releases are delayed based on the approach you're taking to testing, that may also be like a hidden cost of not considering other testing strategies.
How are escapes different from bugs?
Yeah, an escaped issue would be a bug that should have been caught through your testing standard. So it's a way of categorizing your bugs. So like, let's just pretend you build code and you just ship it. Well, then you don't really have escaped issues because you're arguably not testing at all. But if you have,
all sorts of issues if you're doing that. Yeah.
All sorts of issues. But if you're a big company and you have 4 gates of testing and you still have issues or bugs escaping there, then, you know, something is probably broken along the way. And sometimes it's a process break, sometimes it's a technology break, you know, but depending upon your level of investment and the sophistication of your combination of people and machines, you know, you can have very different thresholds. That's why we just give like a basic, you know, escaped issue per hour of testing rate. We also see that when humans are doing testing, pre-production, code's pretty good, processes are pretty mature, humans will pick up about 0.3 issues per hour of testing. And that number varies dramatically as well too. But what we'll often see as a signal of a good partnership with our clients is that number might start higher when we begin working with a company. It might be between 1 and 2 issues per every hour of testing. And if it stays high like that, well, then perhaps there's something wrong with the feedback loop, that, you know, processes aren't changing as bugs are being caught, they're not being addressed or remediated, fixed, merged, et cetera. Because typically a healthy partnership for us is that issue per hour of testing rate is going down over time. And then, you know, depending upon release velocity, how much we're regressing, how much we're doing new feature testing, it tends to kind of stabilize in what seems to be a healthy zone. And again, that differs based on companies. But it's interesting how often we see this, you know, 0.2 to 0.5 issue per hour of testing rate across the business.
It seems like payments would be an area where people really want to test, right? Because that's when the financial transaction's happening. How much of the testing do you do is related to payments?
It's one of the fastest growing areas of the business. So over the last 5 years, we've been doing a lot of OTT testing with media companies and sports leagues and teams. The challenge there has been 12 different streaming devices, so Rokus and Samsung TVs and PlayStations. It's a hardware-centric problem with a bit of location. Over the last 2 to 3 years, the fastest-growing piece of the business has been in payments testing. You may have seen, Joel, that amplified by Black Friday and Cyber Monday, something like 1 out of 10 digital payments are failing currently. Now, it's gotten better. You know, I think 2 to 5 years ago, it was like 2 to 3 out of 10, but still 1 out of 10% of digital payments are failing. And a lot of times it's the intersection where things fail. So many of us have had the experience where we're traveling and we go to buy something and our location is picked up and our credit card company puts an interstitial in between the transaction. We have to verify, sometimes via a text message. And it's those kind of payment handoffs between different systems, you know, that oftentimes cause the challenge. And so companies then have to determine, well, do we go into the field and send people into real world situations to try and see, using all sorts of different devices, if we can catch some of these potential payment failures? We do a lot of work with a large payment network provider, and they are about to enter into a new partnership with a mobility provider. And they decided that it was so important that the whole experience from reservation through car pickup, through lot departure, through car usage to return to ultimate finalization of invoice, that whole process had to be absolutely perfect. And so they had to send people all over the world to airports. They've been building this partnership. It's very mature technology. And as we send people into airports, we found sometimes that, the pop-up that's supposed to happen as you're leaving the airport lot was coming in a day later. Oh, okay. Well, why was that? Where was the problem in the handoff? What was delaying it? And so those sorts of things are really hard to pick up if you're only doing lab-based testing or you're doing testing with just an in-house team. You can do testing like that at big scale for these, again, I use the term moments that matter, these critical moments that matter.
Is that a public relationship, that travel company that you work with? Can you guys talk about?
No, that's not. Just like the top 3 social media provider. Like, I so wish I could, I could say the names because everybody would know the names. But as you can imagine,
I know a lot of the guys. I was like, I was talking with a guy who was making technology in the travel industry just like that.
Man,
we could talk off the podcast.
yes, like, exactly.
Wink twice if it was so and so. The number of times, Steve, that I've guessed acquisitions by accident or like guessed sensitive data by accident and just in conversations, it's more than 10 that we've had to like edit out. And it's not because I'm particularly smart. It's usually because I'm a user of a product and I'm like, it'd be great if it had this. And then that's the next logical step. So obviously they were already working on it, right? So
yes. Well predicted. Yeah. Can you bring that to Vegas somehow?
No, but what was the one I predicted that's now public? Zoom Info. They're like a data company. I was talking to one of the CEO or the CXO or something, and I was a customer of their product. And I was like, I really wanted it to happen this. And he's just like, we got to edit that out. And I can't tell you why. And I said, okay, cool. And then like 3 months later, he posted a post on LinkedIn calling me like Nostradamus. And he shared the story. And I was like, thank you so much. I'll show my wife that I was right outside of the marriage.
I've been with my wife for 24 years. Be careful about, showing too many being right. It's much better to accentuate, yes, I was wrong, honey. Yes, I was wrong, honey.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah. I'm 10 years into this and I have learned many survival skills.
Well done. Well done. Marriage is applied to podcast hosting.
There we go. We do a whole series on it. So when these companies, engineering side of my brain's running off in a million directions on how I would use you as an engineering team or engineering org, how much work does it put on us when it comes to testing? Do we just give you our product and you tell us like all these things that should be tested and then we add some extra special things on top of that? Or do we have to do 100% of the work? Where does that lie? Coming up with test cases, I guess.
There's a few different approaches which seem to work well for a lot of our clients. One is exactly what you described. So we have a team of engagement managers and testing coordinators, and they take builds and they ensure that machines and humans are equipped to test in smart ways. And developing the instructions to test is a perfect LLM problem. So earlier this year, we started applying generative AI to this whole test case development process. And it turns out that using, for us in this case, it's the Azure instance of OpenAI, because we have a partnership with Microsoft, and Microsoft ensures that data is extractable and that it's protected and that it's confidential. So we didn't want to just throw things into OpenChatGPT since test cases are our clients' data. So we put this data into this segmented version of OpenAI, and we can create test cases 30 to 40% faster. And we can also refactor test cases because there's not only the initial set of instructions that you develop, but then anytime the product changes, your test cases, if you're doing regression testing, for example, should also change along with that. So refactoring test cases is also much faster using large language models. And just to maybe go a little bit more on AI, there's also the opposite end of instructions, which an issue for us is something that needs to be captured in a way, demonstrated, reproducible, all sorts of metadata, tags, prioritization, severity against it. then sent into our customer system. So about 70% of our clients use Jira, and our platform where we do all the work hooks into Jira. There's a bi-directional integration where we push things into Jira, then we get updates as things are happening in Jira. And it turns out that if you give a tester and a test lead the opportunity to run the issue through a large language model that's tuned for what we're trying to do, that the issue is, we estimate, about twice as trustable, which is grammatical clarity, clear structure, no typos. Because it turns out that when humans see an issue and it's messy, they don't trust it as much, which means that they then may deprioritize it, which could actually be a mistake. So this speed of the test case and trustability of the issue, those are really good AI challenges. Now, to your original question of how hard is this for companies? So that the one model is just give us the build. The second model is some companies have test cases that sit in systems like X-Ray or TestRail, for example, and we have integrations with those systems. So we can take a build in. We talk to CI/CD pipelines. We use test flight, lots of different ways to take builds. We'd also take test cases into our platform from third-party systems. If companies are already maintaining those, we don't need to duplicate the efforts. And then I'd say the third model is that companies will sometimes come into our tools with us. And we have this partnership, sometimes with product leaders, sometimes with quality leaders. And we're really co-creating how to test things and when to test things. And it's not a fully managed service partnership in that case. It's kind of a co-managed testing experience. Does that, I know, Joel, I threw a lot at you there. I hope that wasn't too much.
No, not at all. What was interesting to me is I didn't know quality managers existed. Tell me about those types of people.
So many companies have directors or vice presidents of quality engineering. So these are companies that are operating at scales of hundreds or thousands of software developers. And the vice president of quality engineering oftentimes reports directly to an SVP of engineering or the CTO. And they're thinking a lot about process, tool, and partnership in order to ensure the velocity and integrity of the release. And so there's the quality of the engineering process, and then there's the quality of what the engineering team produces. And those teams will sometimes have quality managers and quality analysts. People are doing manual testing, full-time dedicated. They'll sometimes have software developers who are building automated test scripts. Sometimes they're called quality engineers internally. And in some cases, these teams will really choose to crowdsource or outsource the majority of that work. And so we love when teams have quality organizations internally because it's a demonstration of a commitment to quality. We have some clients where we are their quality solution, but usually this partnership model where there are in-house members embedded within the engineering team that are driving quality standards and testing quality hypotheses, those are awesome folks for us to partner with. So while the CTO might set the strategy and decide to bring Testlio in, it's that internal quality team, if it exists, who can often ignite great experiences.
That's what all the CTOs are doing right now. They're going to Testlio.com and they're signing up. I'm just putting that out there. And that's fun. Okay, so how do you test Super Bowl and World Cup type events? What do you even begin to do to test something like that?
Yeah, those are fun. So it's been an honor to work with. This is public, Fox and Paramount. And Paramount's now the parent company for CBS. So for those of us in the US, we know CBS and Fox as primary broadcasters. So they've had Super Bowl rights for the last 5 years. And now we've also publicly disclosed that Peacock, which is the NBC streaming service, is a client of ours. So if we continue to do work well, we should test every Super Bowl going forward with the 3 primary broadcasters who rotate the rights each year. And each company does it a little bit differently. But what you can imagine is that there's a distributed war room that starts to build up to game day and that uses techniques of development, monitoring, and testing on increasingly large-scale important events. So you might start with a Sunday game and say, well, what if we treat it as if it was the Super Bowl? And then you may have an NFC playoff game, and then you may have the NFC championship, and then you may, depending on the year, have a World Cup game, or you might actually have a pay-per-view fight that has a massive audience. And a lot of times you're preparing for a big front door challenge. People are coming in all at the same time. You're preparing for, is your advertising firing if you're selling it at all by location? Many advertisers still sell local TV markets. And so how do you apply that to digital so that you don't get these weird lags, or just wait, we'll be right back with you. That's, wasted ad revenue. Then also, how are you tracking everything? So are your analytics systems operating well also? And how is that operating for hundreds of millions of people, across most broadcasters we see are focused on 12 OTT devices. That gives you a lot of coverage, at least here in the US, but there's all sorts of different firmware and operating system issues even associated with those device family. And a first generation Apple TV is really different from a recent Apple TV. We live in Texas, so we actually have, it's a little embarrassing to say, but we have 5 Samsung TVs. I have 3 kids, and we're lucky to have some space here in Texas. And each of the experiences of running digital apps natively on those Samsung TVs is really different in just my household. So you could say TV is an OTT device, but you get it, right? It's really different.
We have one, I have an 8, like you're on an 85-inch screen right now in front of me, like back a couple feet.
I'm sorry that you have to see me
huge.
in 85 inches.
You're massive.
I should back up a little bit there, Joel.
You're a handsome man. So we deviated from our Roku choices recently and got, we were getting Roku built in, and then we got like a Samsung, but we were so used to the Roku that I just bought a Roku and shoved it into the Samsung because I was like, I don't want to learn another interface. Then for the kids, the Roku didn't have the parental controls that we needed. It wasn't very good at all. In fact, I actually tried to hunt down the CTO of Roku to get them on a call, and they're owned by like this asset company. So I don't think there is one. But because they were putting like horror stuff on my TV and I couldn't turn it off. And I have kids in the house. I like walk through the living room. I'm like, we can't do that. Ultimately I posted about it, complained about it in Reddit, and somebody told me about how to go into developer mode and like turn some stuff off. And I did that for the main room. But for the kids, we went to the Google Play, which oddly enough, Google had some amazing kids, probably the best I had seen in a long time. And the ways to configure it for kids. And so Amazon kids tablet has some great way to configure it for kids, but you're exactly right. We've got all of these different screens and all of these different, but yet the content, it's still Netflix inside of there.
It's right? But how well Netflix runs. So we just upgraded a TV that had, unfortunately, a weak CPU, pretty modern TV, but we went with like the cheapest version. And so like the CPU just couldn't keep up. So, one of the apps that we use a lot, Testlio doesn't test this app, YouTube TV. When we were streaming ESPN, it would hiccup all the time and freeze. And my kids like basketball, and so I'd get yelled at. And we now have this beautiful modern Tizen Samsung TV, and the YouTube experience, same Wi-Fi signal. It's entirely different. And then we have Chromecast and all sorts of other things. I'm glad you mentioned Roku. So plug to Roku International. So I just did an interview, this is available on Testlio.com, with the director of localization for Roku. So we work with Roku on localized experiences in 25 different countries. And the approach that Nicole and her team take to localize Roku is really, really good. We don't work with Roku in the US. I will talk to Nicole about your experience.
Give an intro.
There.
I was trying to find the CTO and I couldn't. First of all, I am a fan of Roku. Okay. I've been an early customer of them. I have bought an untold number of devices, both by personal choice, advancing it, and my dog chewing it. So there's many reasons why I continue to buy them. But that one thing, it blows my mind that, and I get it. They've got advertisers and they need to advertise horror movies when horror movies are being advertised. But I've got kids in the living room, man. Like that can't happen. You turn that off.
Yeah, well, really, really well put. My mom, she's 76. She loves her Roku. I mean, she couldn't be happier. She puts it, I turn it on, and it does what it's supposed to do, and it's easy for me.
It's easy.
So
it's so
huge
easy.
shout out
and
from
it goes
me
with me wherever
Roku.
I want. When we were camping, so we did the whole tour across the U.S. for a year in a camper. And we did a bunch of camping before that as well, just to like test it and see if we liked it. And it was so great that I could just pull out the dongle from the main TV in the living room and then just go plug it into the camper. And I don't have to do password settings, changes, or anything. It just works and you could take it with you. We take one with us when we go to hotel. We don't have a camper anymore, but we just did a trip to Florida. We take it with us when we go on our trips. So when we get to the hotel room, I don't have to mess with the hotel authentication and all of that jazz. I just plug it right into the HDMI and the back of the TV. And it just is like exactly what we pick up where we were at home. So I love the product. Yeah.
Look at this, Jill. Your listeners are getting marriage counseling. They're getting Roku travel tips from you.
Parenting tips.
Vegas gambling, everything. The whole it's a full podcast. Joe Rogan should be tuning in.
He is 100%.
Right. There we go.
What is signal-driven testing?
Oh, signal-driven testing. So when companies start to integrate the different tools that they're using to build, release, and test products, and even to support their customers and to pay attention to what people are posting on things like review sites, they start to have more and more signals of the end user experience, the quality of their technology. And so signal-driven testing it's a mindset and a methodology which says you should be tuning your testing constantly on where you're getting signals that demonstrate that maybe something is escaping, going back to our escaped issues conversation from before. And so a signal could come from the App Store, and it's not just a 1-star review. It's often the detailed content that sits within the app review, because you may get a 5-star review that actually tells you that the person had a problem. Like you might love Roku and you give Roku a 5-star app review, and then you would talk about this horror movie problem and the inability to filter out content. Well, that would be a signal. And so if we're mining the App Store intelligently and we're interpreting and using sentiment analysis and other forms of intelligence to pull these signals out, well, those signals then should be hooking back into your test cases to determine, okay, did we miss something in testing? Or in certain cases, signals can very rapidly be turned into issues. You don't have to do more testing. You can see that the signal is truly a problem. So companies use systems like Zendesk, and too often customer support is fairly disconnected from quality. So just like DevOps and quality, I think, are coming together, I think support and quality are coming together as well too. And so how do you take advantage of what Zendesk might tell you? If you use Launch Darkly and you find that you're feature flagging things on and then frequently turning them off, well, that's a signal perhaps that something that is creating a candidate for a feature flag on isn't going through the appropriate testing. So how do you then interpret that and change some of your processes? So we think right now there are 9 different categories of signals that can be used to drive quality processes. And really, it's probably pretty old school. It's all about continuous improvement. When quality, we see this a lot with our clients. When it seems to be kind of dialed in and it's working, that's usually an indicator that we're not thinking of what more we should be doing or what we should be changing, because products are changing, technologies are changing, and end user expectations are changing. And the signals are out there. It's just, how do you interpret them, prioritize them, and then help teams also who are always just way too busy. Most of the engineering organizations we work with, maybe all of them, have backlogs that they're impossible to get to. So then, as more and more things are coming through, well, how do you really take an intelligent approach towards remediating the things that have, ideally a high return, help company grow revenue, help retain users, lower cost for the company itself, and then have a reasonable investment to fix. And that, that ROI of issue remediation is an important thing as well too. So that's how we think about signal-driven testing.
That's interesting, because so are you actually doing the sentiment analysis off of App Store type reviews? Or are you partnering with somebody that does that?
So we partner with a company that has rights to take our customer-owned App Store review data and to have that sit within the Testlio system with permission. get this notion that we're a repository for our clients' content. We don't own it, they own it. We keep it highly secure and confidential, et cetera. So then we've been using some third-party technologies, some appropriately used open source technologies, and some proprietary technologies to turn the review into a signal. And we're still learning along the way. I think we're quite good at taking certain signals and other signals we're trying to better understand what they mean. And a lot of it we do in partnership with our clients too. So we may introduce the idea and run then an experiment to see, like, if we pay more attention to this particular type of signal, what might it do for us? Another example are flaky automated tests. So you create automated tests and then they're giving you positives or negatives, but are they false or true? And so a flaky automated test could be a type of signal that you really want to pay attention to. And so the journey might be not about the software itself, but about your automation journey and how do you make test automation of a higher quality standard, if that makes sense.
The more bugs we can find, the better. All right?
That's it.
That's the goal.
Well, the goal is first, let's try not
find
to
your mistakes. Yeah.
We like to say the first goal is to not ship bugs. We can have a great partnership with some of our clients. It's really an assurance. If you think of quality assurance, like it's really about helping engineering leaders sleep well at night by not shipping any bugs. So we have very successful partnerships and we report like 0 issues. Whereas in other cases,
awesome.
especially for nimble companies, emerging companies, high velocity companies that have a higher tolerance risk, well, then it's about, how quickly do you catch? What's the cost per bug effectively? How much does it cost to remediate? Are we sending too much noise? Because we'll see sometimes that based on prioritization and severity marking, the way that things get tagged, things may turn out to be heavily skewed towards what our customers perceive as low priority issues. And clients then might say, well, should Testlio send us these low priority issues? And most of them will say, yes, we still want to know. As long as it's a valid, reproducible issue, we want to know that it's an issue, even if it's something that, we're not going to tackle it now from a prioritization standpoint because we know we have this next major overhaul and probably this thing is going to get merged into a whole other thing. But, certainly anything that might be a P1 or a Sev1, like those are the kinds of things that most companies are looking to address really quickly. And we're trying to help companies better measure the addressability of issues and the timeliness to address as well too. So one metric that we're experimenting with some clients is what percentage of issues that Testlio provides are addressed within 90 days. And we hold it something like 90% within 90, partially because that's just an easy heuristic to remember. Or 90% of the issues getting addressed within 90 days. But then are your P1s getting addressed within hours? Not within months, but literally super rapidly. And, they may get deployed a little bit later, but, how quickly is that feedback loop happening? And some clients are picking up issues and they're tackling things in minutes. It's really cool to see the pace of addressability happening now, Joel.
That's cool. Well, yeah, my butt's always on fire when there's something wrong. You got to get it taken care of.
That's it. That's it.
Dude, Steve, man, we made a podcast. How do you feel?
I feel great.